Hey everybody, this is Dan Dembski. I had an opportunity to sit down and chat with Brad Fauber from the Northern Virginia Daily. He's a sports writer there, and he gave me some great information about his day-to-day tasks, his career history, uh, and just overall the state of the newspaper industry. And he reiterated some very strong points that were made both in the textbook and in our discussions about the newspaper industry struggling, specifically with budget cuts and loss of staff as a result, and things of that nature. Um, so Bradley is a sports writer at the Northern Virginia Daily. He's been there since 2012. So he's been there, he said, almost 6 years. I think he's coming up on 6 years this year. Um, and Bradley, of course, has seen a lot of changes um, since then. They report there's no longer a sports editor. There was a sports editor when he got there. Now there's just a managing editor. That's his boss. Um, Also, there are only two sports writers for the entire newspaper, which is interesting to me. And they cover a huge territory. Um, they cover, let's see what he said, 10 public schools, 6 private schools, I want to say. And they cover Shenandoah, some Shenandoah sports, as well as JMU. So they have a lot of ground to cover, and with just two people, he said it gets really difficult. Um, so of course, with the budget cuts, they're asking them to do more. There's only two people. There's, like you said, there's only two people to cover all that territory, and it's very difficult um, for him. Sometimes he said, compared to when he got there, when they had 3 or 4 writers on staff, sports writers on staff when he got there. So that's changed a lot. Um, let's see. So when I asked him if newspapers were going to die, which was one of the recommended questions here, he said no. Well, he simply said it's not crazy to say that they could die in the future. He said that's probably further down the road. He said in the near future newspapers will continue on, and he said many newspapers are digital now. The Northern Virginia Daily is a great example. Um, all of their stories are posted online, and you can access them for free, which is very different than a lot of your um, newspapers like the New York Times, the Washington Post, just to name a few, and of course more local papers like the Winchester Star. You have to have a subscription to the paper itself to read their full stories online. So that kind of makes Northern Virginia Daily unique in that realm. And he said, um, with social media as well, they're seeing a big change. He said, it's a lot easier to get a story out and for people to read a story that's on social media or on the website than it is to just get a hard copy newspaper. So he said, that really is one of the downfalls of the newspaper is that you're not getting that instant access thing that you're getting when a story's online or when a story's on Twitter or Facebook or something like that. Let's see. So he said the digital thing, the way that social media has played a role is helping innovate it in a way, I guess you could say. And he said it's helping the newspaper industry survive. So he said they're not doing great. Like I mentioned, they've had some budget slashing, which I mentioned in my paper, and how there's only two sports writers now as opposed to when he started. So um, there's definitely a difference in staff as far as there's a lack of staff, like was mentioned in the textbook. So um, I think it's kind of interesting to get a firsthand impression of the newspaper industry. And going in, I thought he might sugarcoat it in some way, but he was very open, very honest about it. Explained that the newspaper industry right now is not what it once was, and that it's going to have to continue to evolve digitally to survive. So I thought that was very interesting. Um, I guess the final thing, I mentioned that already. I guess some background on Bradley. He went to Virginia Tech. He was a communications major. He graduated in 2011, and he was doing freelance journalism for the Northern Virginia Daily before then. before his graduation. So when he graduated, he was able to have the experience and the stories and the knowledge to just go straight in and get a job at the Northern Virginia Daily. So that's pretty cool, and that's kind of what I hope to do. I'm trying to get an opportunity to freelance either there or at the Winchester Star. I'm gonna try to get in touch with them and see if they have any openings maybe for the summertime, because it's always great to have that experience, especially right now being in community college. This is my last semester, so I hope to, after I transfer, I can have my feet wet, already know kind of what to expect with the classes I'll be taking and things like that. So Bradley was very informative. He's very helpful. Um, really down to earth guy. And again, he was open and honest with me about the industry and about how it's struggling in some ways. And but he also mentioned something very interesting. I kind of want to finish with this, that it's not just the newspaper industry that's struggling. Um, he mentioned ESPN, and I think we've all seen the layoffs that ESPN's had in the last 6 months to a year. All the big names they've let go, and um, so he said, it's not just contingent on newspapers. It's across the board. Um, News media in general struggling in some ways because people have access. And he didn't mention this, but I think with certain news apps and certain sports apps, people can just access the scores, access the news, whether it be sports news or just regular news right there from their phone, and you never have to turn on the TV or pick up a newspaper or go on the internet. Even you can just pull your phone right out and it's right there. So it's instant. And so I think in a way, the newspaper is losing in that realm. It's not instant. You're not getting that newspaper right now in your hands. So um, again, um, I like to thank Bradley Fauber for his time and his information. It was very eye opening for me, um, and very informative. So I'd like to thank Bradley again, and thank you guys very much for your time. Take care.